down in inverted commas, as we had to undergo to deal with this crisis or this pandemic. And then it's not something physically you can see. The disease is not like, you see we have a hurricane and the place is, electrical cables on the ground, so you see the danger, so you stay away. In this case, it's not a visible danger, so to speak. So when you tell somebody, you have to stay inside and don't go and don't interact, it goes against the norm of everything that you know. So I suspect that in its own right, and I talk about that, so there's a psychological aspect, and of course, the physical aspect is being confined. It's like you're in some sort of prison. So I can understand the average Joe not, it's not reconciling with their normal behavior. We are rum shop people. We like to go by the side and lime and cook and interact and so on. So it creates, I think, a difficulty from there generally and psychologically. But, the overriding concern with this is that this is a thing that can kill you. Yeah. It's like HIV and AIDS. If you don't take precautions and do what you have to do, you can end up killing not only other people, but yourself and other people, and your loved ones as well. So it is something that individuals have to take serious responsibility, and understand that their behavior is going to cause us more harm than good. So.
Yeah. Picking up on the serious responsibility part of it, there is that, and the serious responsibility meaning the personal responsibility that we all have. Right. But there seem to be this a thrust and a focus from us, who should be responsible, that there are cracks in the system. So we kind of seem to be shifting the responsibility on the state. Is it a mixture, or what is it?
Well, there's no doubt that it's a collective responsibility, that the state has the regulatory, creating the framework in which this must happen. We've seen that the Ministry of Health is being divided, so to speak, hospital services and more health, which takes in the COVID response and management generally. Now, Brenda, we have to take this COVID seriously. As Chris pointed out, it kills. I mean, you look at the broader global perspective, 55 million people has been affected by the COVID. It's killed 1.3 million people, a lot of people. We've been very fortunate in the region, and more particularly in Grenada, where we've had no deaths from this. We've had, 33 known and infection and 4 active as we speak. So if you look at Grenada, we've been doing pretty good in terms of the system. But there's what Chris is referring to, fatigue also. That we reach a point, particularly it's not visible, it's not tangible, you don't see it, it kills people. So absolutely it's a collective responsibility. I like to take the approach where I like to panic about it. Throw at me the extreme measures, enforce those measures where possible. We see that the state has invested in personnel and systems to manage this. How you call these people that go out and check contact tracing and all that? It become a very specialized activity. Now, and within the protocol, within the regulations, there are penalties if you don't adhere to the laws governing this. So what we've seen, as you talk about cracks, Brenda, that individuals have been careless. This carelessness, it could be described as recklessness, particularly if you should know better, because it calls for a little more vigilance, it calls for a little more thought about where you are and what you're doing and how you interface both physically and otherwise with persons. And there's good news in the horizon, and we can talk about that. But for the meantime, we have to adhere to the protocols that are established. Pure and simple.
I would only want to add that, Grenada as a state has done really good. When you look at what's happening around the world, and even close to our neighbors, we have managed this exceptionally well. And kudos to the Ministry of Health and all the frontline people who did an excellent job. And none of us, Brenda, in this environment is new. I mean, first time I hear about the word pandemic in my life. And you really get to understand what a pandemic is. You hear about epidemic and all kind of other demic. But pandemic, certainly. And even from a business perspective, none of us had pandemic in part of our safety protocols. So it's something very new to all of us, government, you know, and John public as a whole. So, you know, it would be a learning process, and I understand the cracks and so on, and there would be, because it's so new to us, and all of us have to adjust to this new environment and the new rules and the expectations and all of that. So it's a transition, and it's evolving, and this disease continues to change and evolve, and you know, do all the things that it's doing. You're hearing so much about long haulers, all kind of things with this disease. So you know, it's so new to all of us, and that's why, you know, it's referred to as how it's referred to, you know, this novel COVID.
Yes.
It's so
and
new.
that's a part that we miss, that it's novel, it's new.
It's new, and that is, so all this, you know, the public health protocols around this is going to be new to us as well.
Well, even that, because they keep revising, they're finding out new things, you know, lots of moving parts, you know, with it. So it means that, and you use the word vigilant, Mr. Campbell, it means that there has to be a certain amount of vigilance, not just from the individuals, but collective business everywhere. And even in some of the business protocols, as we heard very much in the news last week with cases 31 and 32, and some of the cracks and some of the things that happened or did not happen at businesses, something as simple as, you know, keeping a log, or what I think is simple, as keeping a log of the guest who enters the establishment. We all have to do our part.
Yeah, I mean, it comes to the point, I mean, as you and I was discussing earlier, if the government, you know, there's always this fine balance between livelihoods and lives. And if we want to get the economy back up to a certain degree, and we opening up to ensure there's livelihoods, then people need to understand, if you come into my restaurant or my establishment and I have certain protocols as the government have asked us to put in, sign in the book, put in the information. We know hearing about people putting wrong name, putting wrong address, giving false information on the thing. It is that level of, I suppose, carelessness or you know, lack of some sort of discipline to say that, you know, if something was to happen, as in case 31 and 32, as we found out, after they checked and the contact tracers, there were a couple of businesses that did very well, had all the information, and it was easy for the contact tracers to establish. But the one in the COG that did not do well and didn't follow the protocols is where we ended up with the issue. And it exposed a certain level of weaknesses that would have come up, you know. So it is so important that we insist, or not we insist, but we try to educate our public that, you know, this is not business as usual. And if the health authorities and the other authorities have said to the community enlarged, here guys, we understand you must have livelihoods, people need to work, people need to get monies to do what they have to do. Well, at least be disciplined enough to follow and insist. I have had customers come to my business, you know, Brenda, and when we ask them at the gate, listen, you have to fill out and give the details, and some of them say no, they're not doing it, so we tell them, thank you for your business, but you know, no thanks. I cannot put all my staff at risk and the entire business to shut down in case I get a possible breach. And that is the criticality of this thing.
I really applaud the businesses who decide that, okay, if you're not going to comply, then I won't be able to serve you. I won't be able to accept your business because you are putting my business at risk.
And your staff.
Exactly.
This is a life or death situation. So my approach is zero tolerance. There are laws, there are regulations. You break that. It's akin to attempt. Well, I won't put it attempt. The point is, people, it kills. You can die from this, and that's what the regulations are there to prevent. The illnesses, the contamination, the spreading of this viruses. Because not only people can die, but you can overwhelm your health facilities and services. And we have certain thresholds and limitations there.
Most definitely.
So you have to understand that. So when I say zero tolerance, the persons, the individuals that break the law must be prosecuted fully. That's my position on this, without exception.
I agree.
Because of the implications. So if there are regulations where you must fill in your restaurants and fill in, give the information, you're obligated to do this and to have it. So you don't, you close down, you know. But there's one way of talking, Brenda, about that aspect of it. But there are a lot of implications, particularly the economic aspect of it. You know, how Grenada, how as a country we managed this. And I mean, we were hearing just at the close of the week about the cruise ship out of the Grenadines that, in fact, unfortunately, contamination and had to return.
Yeah.
And you see the economic impact. I mean, what happens now? What does the population think now about going forward? How easy it is for the population now to accept that it is safe to do this?
Yeah.
But the ship was only able to determine that because of the protocols that they had there.
Right.
So you see, the protocols are important regardless of which level you are operating from.
Yeah. Well, the ship returned to Barbados, and reports out of Barbados as of Saturday is that there are now a total of 8 COVID cases on board. So it might be safe to say we dodged a bullet.
Yeah.
Well, and the cruise ship industry out for a pretty long time.
Yeah.
Because this was a test,
Yeah.
and a test run to see, and unfortunately, it didn't work as it ought to. So, you know, the confidence level, and that's the thing, you know, bringing back business is confidence.
Yeah.
The average person having the confidence to go on a cruise and be exposed possibly and be confined, because a cruise ship is much more confined.
Yeah.
Similarly for air travel.
Yes.
Is the confidence to get on a plane and, you know, expose yourself potentially to something like that. And we have been getting cases coming in that are positive. You may not have symptoms when you get on board.
Yes.
But between getting on board with your negative PCR test and getting to the destination, you're seeing that when they test you a second time, you're coming up positive. And there are a number of these cases now where people are coming in negative PCR tests, and then when you get here into the required destination, you test, you get a negative. Of course, that's the asymptomatic issues.
And Senator Allie, you have just reinforced the point as to why quarantine is important and why it should not be broken, and why we have to be deathly serious about it.
That's correct.
We have to be deathly serious about it. Because as you said, you're asymptomatic, you don't know, you come in and we don't quarantine you, you infect people. And it just keeps just a ripple effect.
I think it was case 29 or case 30, and the person moved all over the country, and the government had to stand the cost of quarantining 70 odd people and testing all of them. I mean, a PCR test is not a cheap thing. When you're here, it's what, $400+ for negative, so you multiply that by all the people that have to quarantine and get tested for the government. It's a costly exercise.
Is it possible that we can up the technology? Because clearly, the GPS tracking and tracing, I mean, technology is obvious that...
We need to get to that.
You're designated to be in your household. Once you move, there's a buzzer somewhere that tells me...
I think you should get a shock on your hand.
Or something of the nature, you know? Absolutely, you know. But the police is aware, the monitoring people is aware that so I think the technology is there to avoid that, at least to mitigate against.
But again, you know, Byron, is a challenge for us. Our health sector, again, have the challenge of just meeting testing and the cost associated with testing. I mean, all of these apps and these new technologies you see out of the more developed world, out of the Chinas and so on that they have, and all the background statistical work they do on people and watching them and so on. I mean, that is great. But for us to have systems like that here, is the cost of one to get it. The second is to man it. It's not just getting it, it's to be able to man it and be able to, for it to be effective.
The resource is that's the part that we don't pay much attention to, the resource in managing the technology.
I mean, God help us, something was to happen here and we had to have, you know, all these respirators and ICU units and isolation. And I mean, it is just, it's a costly thing.
So avoidance is the best.
Mitigation and controls, and that's why the quarantine really have to be and
you can't blame the authorities when they tell you no. The bubble bus, of course, we had a bubble again.
In the regional bubble?
No, only OCS bubble, all them bubble gone. So,
but the regional bubble bus a long time. No, not just COVID, but anyway, that's another one. That's a whole other show.
When you hear our authorities say, well, you know, the COVID and the quarantine protocols have changed and they have upgraded and trying to tighten it, people complaining. But what is the complaint about? And you know, most of the complaints to that pay coming for our own nationals, you know, who return into Grenada and believe they have a right to stay home and go anywhere and do what they want. You know, and that is a real disappointing thing, you know, that you're complaining about quarantine, even though it's 4 days, 7 days, and I mean, come on.
So I think in principle, the standard the state have set seem to be working and seem to be adequate. I think, but you could have those if the individuals don't adhere discipline. You'll always have problems because it depends on the individual behavior.
Could you imagine? Could you
and
imagine,
we have
Byron?
to get to the point of doing certain things without exception as well. Because in the cases of 31 and 32, people are just a little, the anxiety is, why were they allowed to go? Yes, there's a certain expectation that, you know, you're a scientist and you should have some sort of be conscientious, and we don't expect you to, you know, but we're human beings. So there has to be, I think, consistency with whatever we're enforcing and whatever we're doing.
Yeah, well, you know, that case 31 and 32, obviously, I think the message to the authorities, no exception.
No,
regardless of who you are and what you
Absolutely.
I mean, we just seen Boris, the Prime Minister of the UK, gone back into quarantine because of a possible exposure, I mean, with one of his colleagues. And I mean, it just goes to show that leadership, of course, at all levels is important to send a message to the average person that this is not normal circumstances. And if you're asked to quarantine and follow the protocols of the state, the expectations, you would. I mean, and I always say, could you imagine our frontline workers like the police who had to go and monitor 20, 30 people? I mean, could you imagine the extra stress and work?
And cost.
And cost. I mean, and that is some of the indirect things that we don't talk about.
Yes, the psychological impact.
And economic impact.
Economic.
You know, so that we just take these things lightly. When I tell you stay inside, 4 days, 7 days, stay inside. You know what I mean?
Stay inside for 14 days.
Well, I know this individual that's just returned from the United States on work vacation. And said, how are you doing? How's the quarantine? And they posted a picture to me and he said, this is the best quarantine I've had. So this individual actually enjoying it.
Right,
you know? So the quarantine depends on where you are and how it is set up. Could be...
it's a mindset.
It's a mindset.
It's a mindset.
Yes.
I mean, if you're going to a destination, they tell you have to quarantine for 4 days or 7 days. You have to prepare your mind.
That's correct.
To go there and prepare. So you have to, if you like to read, you better make sure you walk with 2 books.
Exactly.
If you like to exercise, make sure you have a space where you can jump up and down. I mean,
you must have a plan.
Yes. You have to.
And I think the mindset trajectory starts before you make the first step to move, because you have a choice. After you hear what the destination is saying about what happens when you get there, before you leave where you are, you have to decide, am I prepared to do this?
But there's also a mindset to break the
and then
rules.
And then but you have a choice whether you buy the ticket and come, whether you get on the plane, whether you do the test.
So there's a bigger point here. It means that all of us, we have to assume that not everybody is obeying the rules or the regulations, and that virus could be there. So it means that we must do the basic things of wearing our face masks or social distancing and other requirements. This is absolutely essential. So it means that we're vulnerable. Because once our port is open, some persons have been assuming that we will have in these type of incidents are likely to happen. So vigilance is the important word.
Very true.
And I think that we all individually have that responsibility to adhere to the regulations.
It's. I mean, when you look at the tourism industry, I always say, you know,
we'll pick back up in just after the break. We have to take this quick break. I think it's fair for us to assume that everybody have COVID, and treat them as if they're there. It keeps all of us safe. This is Perspectives. Thank you so much for joining us, and we're here at our Great Talk panel. When we come back, Dr. Shawn Charles, our Chief Medical Officer, yes, that he is, he will join us, and we'll be talking more about quarantine, the new regulations, and some more about our state of quarantine and COVID in Grenada. We take a break, we'll be right back.
Dreaming of taking a break and escaping to an idyllic, happy place? Well, finding it does not require you to go too far. You already live in paradise. All it takes is for you to go out and discover it. Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique are blessed with a wide variety of accommodation that satisfy any taste and budget. Find the one that suits you and your family and treat yourself while having peace of mind that your health and safety is a priority. Knowing that we have gorgeous waterfalls, stunning beaches, and flavorful cuisine, let's be tourists in our own islands and enjoy paradise at home.
COVID-19 is a serious health threat. When you touch things like gas pumps, door handles, or someone else's cell phone, you can spread the virus, even if you don't have symptoms. Don't put lives at risk. Wash your hands. Stay 2 meters apart. That's a distance of 2 arms lengths. And if you're sick, stay home to save lives.
Welcome back to Perspectives on this Monday morning. It's inching up to 7:30, about 7:29. Hope you are on the move with us. And of course, you can find us if you have to leave your television sets. We're coming to you live on MTV. You can join the MTV Facebook page, our Perspectives Facebook page, and also Partygrenada and TNR. In our second half of the program, we are pleased to be joined by Dr. Shawn Charles. He is our Chief Medical Officer, and he's our guest panelist this morning. We welcome you, Dr. Charles.
Thank you.
All right, it's a pleasure to have you here. So we were chatting. I'm sure you heard a lot of the discussion, bits and bobs of it. And I'm sure you have lots of things coming at you for the past week, 2 weeks, however long you've been doing this, right? But where we are now, especially after cases 31 and 32, I think really the interest of the general public is, are there new strategies being developed? Are there new regulations? How are we going to be moving forward, especially dealing with the issue of quarantine?
All right, so we have observed, since the option of home quarantine was offered, and I can tell you that option came about as a result of, after we opened, we realized that the demand for travel to Grenada significantly increased. However, we only have a finite number of hotel rooms that are available for quarantine, because not every hotel is willing to participate in the quarantine process. Some will just like to open as normal, charge normal seasonal rates, and so on, even in this environment. So that quickly became a challenge. And there was a period where we had large numbers of persons traveling. So we simply could not house, we simply did not have enough hotel rooms to house all these individuals coming in. So, and in addition, it was felt that the travel in this time period as well is quite challenging, all right? It's quite challenging, it's quite frustrating for some individuals. And for those who had the conditions, home quarantine would have been an attractive option, but an option that would have eased some of the stresses available with traveling at this time. However, we soon realized that that became a major problem for us, because despite the assurances that you get from persons, after arriving, it was a completely different story. Right. And I mean, it is disappointing. We have spoken about these issues many times. The issue of personal responsibility is quite a challenge. So we have had a lot of violations of the home quarantine process, right? Which caused us to sit and decide, okay, we need to change. If we are to avert problems going forward, we need to change. And then this additional situation arose about a week, or just over a week ago, with the two individuals who were, a certain level of trust was placed on these individuals, and of course we know what happened there. So it further strengthened our decision-making process. That listen, this has to change. And the most immediate outcome of these is putting additional restrictions with regards to home quarantine. All right. So the majority of persons traveling to Grenada right now, they will have no other choice but to be quarantined at an approved accommodation. And there are a select few who will qualify for home quarantine.
Who are those?
All right. So it includes individuals traveling with several minors, that is under the age of 16, persons over 65, persons with special needs, either they have a medical issue or a disability, diplomats, government officials, and of course they left room for special circumstances that are not covered.
Okay.
Those will be assessed by a committee
Right.
and given consideration as necessary. Of course, the individuals still, they must have a home that allows for home quarantine to be done in a safe manner. So their home has to be assessed and it has to be approved before they are given permission to stay at home.
Before I let the other panelists come in, Dr. Charles, assessed and approved, monitor, just talk to us about how that works. How do you assess? How do you approve? How do you monitor home quarantine?
Right, so how we assess, right, so the individuals send an application via email. They give the particulars of the house. They must also provide access to the home. So there must be a way for our persons who are going out to visit the home to have access to the home to see if it has the conditions. The homes are visited, all right? The homes are visited. We have a team of wardens and so on. The homes are visited to ensure that it has, to verify the conditions as they say. Now in terms of monitoring, those individuals would be fitted with a tracking bracelet, right? We've had a company offering tracking watches, which also had its issues as well, and that also is being actively addressed. The devices are being replaced by another type of device.
Have we tested those the other time? Have we tested the new time?
Well, of course, there's going to be a period of testing.
Right.
The devices have just arrived, so
Okay.
all of that will occur.
All right. Panelists?
Well, Dr. Charles, I mean, I was on the Ministry of Health website, and there's two things I want to raise here. One is that there is an app there that's called RonaTrack, and I want to say that the ratings for this app is very low in terms of feedback. It's like 2.1% out of 5 in terms of ratings, so that's not good. I want to know whether this has been looked at and assessed. And the other point that I looked at that I'm not clear at all about is, what is the pure safe travel accommodation? Because I'm to understand that if you qualify under the pure safe travel accommodation, you don't necessarily have to be tested at the port of entry, that you can go directly to the hotel. I mean, understanding that we have local staff that is interfacing, and so how is that working? I mean, those two, because I'm to understand that those two, one, the app is to assist and with health, the assessment of the whole, your personal health situation and the protocols that exist in the country. But the other one is that how does a person qualify for this pure safe travel accommodation? It's not clear to me at this point. Yeah.
All right. So
What is the pure safe travel?
tourism is important to Grenada's economy. All right. So in an effort to facilitate tourism, there are two systems that are operating. So there are individuals who are coming back to Grenada, right? Be it they come for a business meeting or to stay or whichever. Those individuals have to serve a period of quarantine, testing, before being allowed into the community, right? That is one system. The other, there are properties, for example, all-inclusive properties, where persons can come to Grenada, they can stay the vacation, enjoy the amenities of the property, never go out into the community. So just stay in the property and then leave. it is a travel corridor or a travel bubble or a destination bubble. It's been known by different names. All right? And very few properties can offer this service. One of the more prominent one is a sandals, for example. All right? So the individuals are allowed to come in, they stay on the property, enjoy the amenities of the property, and they leave without the need for testing. The staff who operate within the travel corridor must adhere strictly to the protocols, to the preventive measures to ensure that they do not become infected. All right, so those are the two issues. Those individuals, if they wanted, for example, to go visit the spice market or to come out of the hotel, they would have to be PCR tested and get a negative result before being allowed into Grenada. So they are held in sort of a virtual bubble. All right, and if they wanted to come out into the community, they must be tested and have a negative test before they are allowed to. Otherwise, they can come, stay their vacation, enjoy the property, and then leave. And it's all controlled. It's all controlled. They cannot just call any taxi to come take them up on the airport or anything. It's all, every step is controlled.
It's called an isolated vacation.
Yeah.
Isolated vacation. You're in Grenada, you know.
And not all hotels can offer this.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right?
Okay. Okay.
A question around there. You know, I was reading recently and listening to Prime Minister Motley and her team there in Barbados that have classified countries high risk, medium, low, and very low. For example, Grenada is classified as very low based on the ranking. And the issue is now, you know, none of us, since the bubble got ruptured between the islands, all countries now require you to quarantine. Regardless of whether you're coming with a negative PCR test or not, you have to quarantine. The quarantine will vary, of course, based on the risk. So the question, Doc, is, are we following that kind of same risk profile in the sense that if you're coming from a high-risk country like, say, the US, your level of quarantine or the time in quarantine will be longer than normal?
Well, we are, but we've modified it a bit.
Okay.
So we have basically only two categories. You're either low risk or you're not.
Okay.
All right. And even if you're low risk, you still require to have your negative PCR.
Right.
You still require to quarantine. All right. So, all right. So that is our. All right. And the period of quarantine is the same. All right. The period of quarantine is the same.
Okay. So whether it don't depend on the country and the risk.
It does
For
not.
us,
It does not.
You're low or you're not.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah. And even if you're low, you're still required to quarantine.
Yeah.
So somebody listening and they're like, yeah, I'm low risk. Why am I still, you know, what is the window between where you're coming from to when you get here? What's the concern in science there, Dr. Charles?
All right. So it is supposed that you are coming from an area where you may have been exposed or not. Because even if you're in a low-risk country, you may spend a couple hours on an airport where persons are transiting from all over the world.
Yep.
All right? So, you know, we just simply say, okay, even if you're coming from a low-risk country, I mean, the potential may still be there that during the few hours that you spend on the airport, you might have been exposed to someone who was passing through, going someplace else.
Right.
All right, so that is why the quarantine, and so it's applied across the board for everyone.
So it's an isolation. It's an isolation practice just in case.
Just in case, yeah.
Okay, so that's what quarantine is, really.
Yeah.
And how many days people are required to quarantine now?
Right.
And
So
the latest update?
generally, the duration of the quarantine period is the incubation period for the disease, which is about 14 days.
Right.
All right. What we require is that you come in, you must have a reservation for at least 5 days.
Okay.
At least 5 days. It could be more. That is why we say minimum. It could be more. All right? So you must have a reservation for a minimum of 5 days. You will be tested on day 4. All right? You will be tested on day 4 after you land here in Grenada. All right? If it is negative, we allow you to exit quarantine. But the result, yeah, we allow you to exit exit the quarantine.
Okay,
Yeah,
right.
exit quarantine.
Once it's negative.
Yeah, once you get a negative test. But the test may take you about 2 days to get the results.
Okay, so that's why we have the 5th day and the 6th day and the 7th day scenario.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
All right, because I mean, there's a reasoning behind that.
Right.
All right.
There's a reason now that we must take a break. We come right back. We come right back and pick up right there. It is Perspectives. We're here with our panel. Of course, our panelists are Senator Christopher Allie, Mr. Byron Campbell, and our guest panelist this morning, Dr. Shawn Charles, our Chief Medical Officer, and we're honing in on quarantine in the COVID scenario. We take a quick break. We'll be right back.
COVID-19 is a serious health threat. When you touch things like gas pumps, door handles, or someone else's cell phone, you can spread the virus, even if you don't have symptoms. Don't put lives at risk. Wash your hands. Stay 2 meters apart. That's a distance of 2 arms lengths. And if you're sick, stay home to save lives.
Dreaming of taking a break and escaping to an idyllic, happy place? Well, finding it does not require you to go too far. You already live in paradise. All it takes is for you to go out and discover it. Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique are blessed with a wide variety of accommodation that satisfy any taste and budget. Find the one that suits you and your family and treat yourself while having peace of mind that your health and safety is a priority. Knowing that we have gorgeous waterfalls, stunning beaches, and flavorful cuisine, let's be tourists in our own islands and enjoy paradise at home.
Welcome back to Perspectives, and we continue right where we left off. Dr. Charles, continue.
Yeah, I was about to say that there's a reason why we test around day 4, all right? And I would not recommend we push the envelope to testing before day 4.
Right.
All right, because we are already on the edge there, all right? And the thing is, the average incubation period of COVID is about 5.1 days. Majority of persons will fall sick by around that time. And someone is able to spread the disease at least 2 days before. So around day 4, that person should have a high enough viral load for to be detected by PCR.
Okay.
All right, but I would not suggest that we go lower than that. However, for persons going into home quarantine, we test them on arrival, and we still test them on a day 4. We test them on arrival because they're going into the community.
Right.
And we know of individuals who go into home quarantine, they might be wearing a tracking watch. They will not leave the house, but they have persons coming in to visit them.
Right.
Persons have found all kinds of ways to get around the system. Yeah. So, and that's why we test them on arrival to ensure, to make sure that, let's say they arrive positive, we detect them quickly, just in case, because they are out there in the community. All right, and then we test them again on day 4.
Okay, so test on arrival, test on day 4 once you're going into
home quarantine.
Home quarantine.
Brenda, I through you, Brenda, the issue of what we're hearing here is testing and several different testing taking place during a relatively short period. accommodation. If I'm a visitor and I'm thinking about coming to Grenada, I'm thinking about these additional costs. In other words, who's responsible for paying the accommodation in social isolation or quarantine, and who's responsible? What are the costs of these tests that are being carried out? Does the government offer free accommodation, isolation, quarantine for persons who may not be able to afford it? What are the structures there, and what are the relative costs involved in a person thinking of coming to Grenada, either returning or coming on vacation? That's an issue that if I'm thinking of traveling, that I'll have to take into consideration.
Yes. So, with regards to testing, up to this point, the government has been, shouldering the cost of the first PCR. So we do not charge you for your first PCR. So let's say you come in, you stay at an approved accommodation, your test on day 4 is free. All right? We have not been charging for that. For persons going into home quarantine, you are tested on arrival. Your first test, that is free. The second test, however, you must pay for it. All right? Because PCR testing it's expensive. I mean, the reagents, it's extremely costly. All right? With regards to the payment for the accommodation, that is at the traveler's expense. Now, the properties that are participating and that are offering quarantine, they charge concessional rates. Could be as low as 50 US per night or 65 US per night, as opposed to what they would have charged during a normal season. All right? And that is at their cost. Now, for persons who are unable to pay, we do have a few rooms at SGU Grenada's campus. It's a limited number, and it's almost always filled. That we do not charge there's nothing to pay to stay there. But it's almost always filled for that reason.
So that's a cost to the government.
It is.
Also.
It is.
It's very important to know that.
That's what we were talking about earlier, Dr. Charles, that, people tend to ignore the cost to the government.
Yeah.
And even also in the private sector as well, with administering the protocols surrounding this COVID and this pandemic. I mean, I could just say from where I sit in the business community, just to put in the protocols and the administrative work, to put the protocols in. If you had to have the temperature gun, you had to buy a gun. You had to put in some staff member assigned, if it's not a security person, some staff member assigned to take in the information and so on. So all of that is cost, and then there's the PPEs behind that, the gloves and the this and the that. And so you have to, even in this environment, and that's why it's so difficult for some people to come back into business.
Yeah.
Because you may want to come back up and start to operate, but you have all these costs associated with protocols. And that is another issue. And I hear the doc talking about your first test free and your second one you have to pay. And he ain't saying the cost, but the average cost when I spoke to the ministry, the hospital is $410 for a PCR test.
Yes, correct.
It's not cheap. And as you just said, the justification is in the reagents. And then there is the other complexity, and that not all tests are accepted from all labs. So in our case, I think is our lab, the hospital is the accepted one. But we have other private institutions that will do tests, but not all jurisdictions will accept it because some other labs, they believe, haven't met all their standardization issues and so on. So there's a lot of complexities involved with it and administering it and the work involved in it. So I say all of that to say, Brenda, at the end of the day, that level of responsibility we spoke about from an individual point of view, could you imagine that if we were to just do that, the work for Dr. Charles and them on the quarantine side would be so much less. And the administering of this and having the security people to watch and make sure people didn't jump through a window and all this nonsense. It is so important that we ask our people to obey the protocols and listen to what they say in quarantine, because when you don't, the impact could be, we have been blessed that we haven't had community spread. But could you imagine that this was to develop. Thank God, everything we have been able to trace it, and it's, you know, from
So kudos to the Ministry of Health. And I mean, when Dr. Charles is here, and I mean the frontline workers. I mean, I just want to, you know, as we say, big them up to really recognize this sacrifice and this very dangerous work that they're engaged with. But here, Dr. Charles, I mean, we've been hearing about the treatment that is coming, the vaccine. I mean, from where you sit, we know what the U.S. is saying, and we have like UK ordering 300 million. You know, large amounts have been ordered. But where's Grenada stand? What's the thinking? How's it going to work out for? Is Grenada part of a regional bloc, Caribbean? How are we going to fit into that? Because that's the next expectation. Because I mean, that's the ultimate goal here, to get the vaccine to Grenada, to the region, at a cost that is affordable, and to store it. But what's the linkage? How are we linked? When realistically can we expect to have some for the vaccine to be in Grenada or in the region?
Right. So yes, there have been some promising news released with regards to vaccines. And I mean, we really need a vaccine to turn this around, all right? This is one of the interventions that is really, would really be timely. Now, of course, one of the obvious issues would be that as soon as an effective vaccine is discovered, as you know, the developed countries with all the resources have already paid for millions of doses. So where does that leave us? I mean, where does that leave us? Thankfully, the WHO has partnered, has a global partnership with some other agencies to create a COVAX facility, And one of the objectives of setting up this facility is to ensure that if an effective vaccine is found, it can be made available to, you know, low-income countries such as ours. All right, Grenada is part of that COVAX facility. Okay. Yeah. So we are, you know, given some assurance that once a safe and effective vaccine is discovered, then we will have access to this. Okay.
All right.
Of course, the rest now, if we get in access, is who gets it first versus who don't get it. And then of course the you know, how is the storage of the vaccine block is a challenge based on what we hear. You know, minus some really ridiculous temperatures, really cold, almost cryogenic temperatures.
And that's where it become critical again for the bubble to reconfigure, because then our institutions like UWI, SGU, and all these institutions will be really valuable to us if that is to happen. Quickly though, Dr. Charles, we're quickly running out of time. The testing from cases 31 and 32, we're not forgetting them, in terms of folks that have been quarantined, what are the results from the contact tracing from the tests you've done from these?
Yeah, I think we have just about 40 contacts, maybe between 38 and 40 contacts. And from the first round of testing, we have one positive.
One positive.
Yeah, one
That's
contact.
a 68-year-old female?
Yes, female in her 60s.
Okay.
All right, so one contact of the two cases that tested positive. And that person is in isolation.
All right. And the second round of testing on the others?
Second round of testing is going to be on Thursday.
This Thursday?
This Thursday. We're hoping that it's second and final round, because once these individuals test negative, I mean, it will also coincide with the 14th day of quarantine. So once they test negative on this second test, they will all be released from quarantine.
Right. In terms of consequential handing down, especially on the business that did not keep the logs, where are we with that?
That is going to be given its attention. All right, that is going to be given its attention. I mean, I would leave that for the legal experts to to determine what is done, what is going to be done there.
Right.
But of course, yeah, you can see how it will complicate things because, I mean, what if we are not able to find out, the names of everyone
Exactly.
that patronized the business while the cases were there?
Right.
All right. Now that person could, go on to infect their family, their co-workers,
Yeah.
So that's why it's important.
Yeah.
These things are important. And as we are here, I mean, there's one observation that is quite troubling, and to us, at least at the Ministry of Health, is that the level of personal responsibility is really, really, really worrying. I mean, a person would choose to enter a crowded nightclub. I mean, I've heard somebody on the radio complaining of that. A person would choose to enter a crowded nightclub after 12 in the night because, they believe the police is not around at that time. You would make a conscious decision to enter a crowded nightclub, a crowded bar, a crowded, all right, without thinking. And then you would go and you would infect your unsuspecting co-workers come the following week if you were infected. And that is the reality.
Yeah.
All right? You go patronize some place on the weekend, throwing cares to the wind. And then your colleagues, your family who have been doing everything in their power to ensure that they are not infected. You go and you sit among them the following week. And if you are infected, you have inadvertently brought the disease to them. It is unfair. It is unfair and it is reckless.
Well, I think we had the recent trends coming out of the US is that you're seeing a lot of infections now, especially in small gatherings at home.
Yeah.
That is now the trend. Yeah. So as Doc is saying, you go out, you relax everything, you go out and then you bring it home to your little family in that little cluster, and infect everybody in the home. And that I suspect is the real thing about the responsibility. You need to be so careful about your behavior.
And this is where the promotion and continues, in terms of the Ministry of Health and the government, in terms of this is not going away, this is serious, it's life or death. Take it seriously, it's an individual responsibility and zero tolerance. You break the regulations, the prosecution aspect has to be firm. People must understand you don't do what is right, there are consequences for this,
Yeah. Because while we have had, and this is where we have to say goodbye, but before we leave, while we have had, the breaking of the regulations and, the sort of nonchalance, we islanders, life is a beach, nothing will happen here, God is a Grenadian. In a large part, I think, once COVID hit and we locked down, I think we as Grenadians, people really took it seriously. Really took it seriously. We did everything. I mean, we were honed into those Ministry of Health press conferences, and people were really serious. I think when we got to the point where we just relaxed around July, and we started to feel like, hey, we okay. It became very testy.
The haunted words, we COVID-free.
Okay. I didn't want to go there, but you did. Right? We won't be COVID-free anytime soon. It seems like we shall be living with COVID, and so we need to be mitigating and living the best we can with it as we try our best to get through this period.
Most definitely.
All right. Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
All right. Dr. Charles, thank you so much. Thank you for everything you're doing for Grenada. Continue to keep safe, and God bless.
All right. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Senator Allie and Mr. Campbell,
Thank you.
same time, same place.
Have a good week.
Next Monday. Have a good week, everyone. On behalf of everyone here, our executive producer, Richie Oliver, Shawn Thomas, our producer, all those who carried on their platform, Nazim Benjamin and Partygrenada, MTV, thank you very, very much for everyone here. I'm Brenda Baptiste. Until Monday, we have some more perspectives. Bye-bye.